All right, we're going to read the second part of chapter 9 today. As I read, I want you to think about what we can learn from Sean by his reaction to his hospital visit. You don't know what that is yet, but you will. And think about what Sean cares about. What do we learn about Mr. H? By the time I got outside, he had pulled the truck up. I got in and he started driving before I even pulled the door all the way shut. I sat and waited for him to tell me what was going on. Finally, it dawned on me that I would have to wait a long time before he would volunteer any information. "Where are we going?" I asked. He didn't seem to want to tell me who was involved. I thought I'd be sly and try and figure it out myself. Hospital. That stopped me. "Who are we going to see?" He took a deep breath, and then he took another one. "Who's there? Is it James? Did something happen to James on his way home?" He shook his head. No, nothing like that." He paused. "I guess there's no easy way to say this. We're going to see your mom." "Oh," I said, and I turned to look out the window. I could feel his eyes on me again, waiting for an outburst, but I really didn't feel much of anything. "You can slow down," I said. "It's not worth a ticket. There are always speed traps around here." "Did you hear me, Sean? I said your mother's in the hospital." "Yeah, I heard you. Did they tell you why she's there?" He shook his head. "Well, my guess is that they found her passed out in some bar and they couldn't get her to wake up. They'll have to pump her stomach and she'll be home by tomorrow." "I'm glad I won't have to be there this time," I thought in my mind. She's always meanest after this. Mr. H had to slow down by the time we passed the cop who was hiding under the bridge. "Speed trap, told ya." "Well, thanks for the warning," he said as he watched his rearview mirror. "No problem." We were quiet for a few more minutes. I could tell he wanted to ask something, but by then I wasn't in the mood to keep the conversation going. "How long have your parents been divorced?" he finally asked. About 9 years," I said, shrugging. "Does your mom have full custody?" I nodded. "My dad has visiting privileges, but he doesn't use them." "Where does he live?" "Well, he just moved to Fort Lewis 2 months ago. But you said last Friday was the first time in 2 years that you'd seen him." "Yep." That kept him quiet for a while. I mean, what do you say to a kid whose father lives only an hour away and is still too busy to come and visit? For that matter, what do you think when you're that kid? I found that the easiest thing was not to think about it at all. Mr. Hassler must have come to the same conclusion because he changed the subject. Well, sort of changed the subject. "Your mom, she drinks a lot?" "You could say that." "How many times has she been in the hospital to get her stomach pumped?" "Well," I said, thinking, 4 or 5. "This has been since your parents' divorce?" "Oh, no. This has been since I was in junior high. I don't remember how many times it happened before that. I had heard of people clenching their teeth, but this is the first time I had seen it personally." "Does your father know about this?" I shrugged again. "I guess maybe the social workers told him. I don't know." "You've seen social workers?" "Oh, yeah, lots of times, especially when mom's in rehab." "Well, then why are you still living with her?" I was quiet for a minute. I didn't have an answer for him when we were pulling into the hospital parking lot. I didn't want to go in there. "Do we have to go in?" "Yes, Sean, I think we do." Great. I took a deep breath. I'm the only thing she has since my dad walked out on us. He left us both without options. I have to tell the social workers that she cares a lot about me because there's nowhere else for me to go. And of course, I laugh a little because it stops the tears. I guess she at least gives a rat's tail about me. I mean, she at least cares enough to lie and say that she does care about me. I slid out of the truck and slammed the door. The bright white of the hospital hallway was broken by an occasional large print hanging on the wall, probably someone's misguided attempt to make the hospital seem less impersonable and threatening. It failed miserably. No one would possibly consider hanging those things in a real home. I went up to the ER desk. "May I help you?" a middle-aged nurse asked me as she cracked her gum. Yeah, my mom was checked in tonight. I'm just here to say hi. What's her name? Candy Cane with a K. The nurse raised her eyebrows, but she was one of the few who didn't actually make a smart aleck remark. I was grateful. Let's see. She checked in at 7:30. She's in. Oh dear, are you here alone? Does it matter? Well, she started. It really bugs me when complete strangers don't want to answer my question. She's in critical condition. There's no visitors allowed. Do you have someone to stay with tonight? What happened to her? I asked at the same time a hand came down on my shoulder. Yes, he does have someone with him here tonight, Mr. H. said to the nurse. She immediately focused her attention on him. Are you his guardian? I am. I looked at him and he dropped me a wink. I'll get a doctor. He'll be able to tell you more about her condition. We headed to the waiting room. Sean? I turned around and there was Miss Walker, looking frazzled. What are you doing here? We both said at the same time. She laughed, well, sort of. My husband managed to get this slice. My husband managed to slice his hand cutting a bagel. He's in getting stitches right now. What are you doing here? You all right? Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm just here to see my mom. She's sick. It might even be pneumonia. I've been lying for her for so long the words just popped out of my mouth without any thought. Mr. H gave me a funny look and he opened his mouth, but for some reason he didn't say anything. Oh, Sean, I'm sorry to hear that. I shrugged. Then there was this really awkward silence. Then Mrs. Walker said as brightly as she could, Well, I better get back to him. I'll see you on Monday, Sean. Bye, Mr. H and I said. While we were waiting for the doctor, Mr. H brought a candy bar and some soda for me and a coffee for himself. The waiting room didn't do much for my appetite. It was a nasty green with orange trim. The hospital decorator should have paid that extra dollar to get a professional opinion. Thanks for the chocolate, I said, holding up the candy bar. You're welcome. It's not quite milk and cookies, but it'll have to do. I grinned. Well, our country may not be on chocolate rations right now, but I don't have chocolate very often. I think I even like it a little better than the milk and cookies. He smiled back at me. I would give you the chocolate even if we were on rations. Neither of us said anything for a few minutes, and the only sound was that of the clock ticking steadily, counting down the time. Hey, I said suddenly, you won't get in trouble, will you? What, for giving you chocolate? He asked, his eyebrows drawn together in confusion. No, I said with a laugh, for lying about being my guardian. He shifted in his chair a little bit. Well, I didn't really lie. You know, it was more like stretching the truth. I don't get it. It's simple, really. I told you that I had arranged for you to stay at the ranch this week instead of going to in-house, and in order to do that, I had to agree to take temporary custody of you. What is it? What does that mean? It means that legally I am responsible for you and your actions. It means that in the court's eye, I am your parent while you are at my ranch. I looked at him. I didn't know what to say. He wasn't required to take care of me. He had volunteered to do so. He could have kicked me out whenever he wanted to. But even though he hadn't known what I was doing, even though I hadn't told him what was going on, he accepted me. He hadn't been ordered to by the court to pay child support, but he brought me candy bars. He hadn't yelled at me for burning our dinner. He came up to offer encouragement while I was doing my homework instead. Sean Parker, a man in a white jacket, was waiting at the door. Yeah, I said, and Mr. H and I looked up. He led us down a quieter section of the hallway, stopping in front of an interior window. I could see a young woman lying on a bed on the other side. She had tubes coming out of everywhere. Little electronic devices beeped and flashed all around her. It took me a couple of minutes to recognize her as my mother. What's her condition? Mr. Hassler asked briskly. She's critical right now, but stabilizing. We should be able to downgrade her no later than tomorrow morning. What happened to her? Mr. H looked at me kind of funny and then put an arm around me and squeezed. I guess I must have looked like I felt like I did the time he pulled the chair out from under me. Kidney failure, and I think her liver's got some problems. She's been doing a lot of drinking by the looks of it. The possibility of life without my mother had always been in the corner of my mind as kind of a fantasy where I could be happy. But I had talked with a friend who had come back after a stint as a runaway, and I knew that my home, as bad as it was still a home. It was still a place I could go, a place where I could usually find food. If my mother died, where would I go? It was the same question that had kept me lying to the social workers whenever they called. Mr. H led me over to a chair and had me sit down. Do you have any information on the type of health insurance she has? Mr. H and I both shook our heads. I don't think she has any. Startled, I looked up and I saw my father looking through the window at her. There was no expression on his face. Send the bills to me. And who would that be? Asked the doctor. I'm her ex-husband. Oh, I see. Well, sir, that will certainly help, but she will need follow-up treatment and a transplant pretty soon. Perhaps you could help me figure out some paperwork and see if we can get her some kind of financial assistance. It's fine. I had finally found my voice. What are you doing here? My father sighed. Sean, this will probably take a while. Take a cab home and I'll pick you up in the morning. He fished out his wallet and tossed a 20 on my lap. I stood, without touching the money, letting it fall to the floor. Why are you here? Who called you? He gave me a quick look that said he didn't want to waste his time talking to me. The hospital called me. I'm still on her financial support list. He ran a hand through his thinning hair. Pick up the money and go home. He was staring through the glass at my mother. Dad, this is Dave Hassler. My father looked at Mr. H blankly and gave a little nod, ignoring Mr. H's outstretched hand. Dad, I said. Dad, I repeated louder this time. I waited until he was looking at me. I've been staying with Mr. H for a week. I'm going back for the rest of the weekend. Don't be stupid. It was nice of he fumbled, unable to remember Mr. Hassler's name. It was nice of him to let you stay, but now you need to go home and pack. You don't need to bother him anymore. I'll pick you up tomorrow and you can stay with me until we figure out what kind of permanent arrangements we can work out together. No, I said, taking a step towards him. He actually looked up and saw me for the first time. I'm going with Mr. H. I have work to do. When I'm done, I will call you. Sean, this is not open for discussion. Right, Dad, it's not. You have been out of my life for years. You're not just going to come back into my life and start giving me orders. I'm your father, he began. Oh, really? And when did you get this news flash? Because you sure have not been my father for the last 9 years. Look, I'm sorry the divorce upset you, but this is hardly the place. It wasn't the divorce, I yelled. It was you. You kept taking me back to her. I told you how bad it was, but you were too busy to fit me into your schedule. I could feel the hot tears on my face, but I could not stop. Not yet. Well, now, Dad, I've got my own life going, and I'm not going to let you butt in and screw up my life all over again. And I shoved past him. He reached out to stop me, and Mr. Hassler stepped towards him, blocking his reach. I could hear their voices growing more distant as I went down the hallway. Finally, when I stepped outside into the calming darkness, I escaped their voices completely. It's the end of chapter 9. Explain what we can learn about Sean at this hospital visit. What does he care about? What changes has he made in his life? And then what do we learn about Mr. H? And we'll continue to learn more about him as we move into chapter 10.